My name is Dawn Madahbee Leach, and I'm the General Manager of the Wabatek Business Development Corporation.
What it is and what you do, just so we have context for that? Great.
Well, I've been with the Wabatek Business Development Corporation for 31 years this year, and in the work that Wabatek does, we have the mandate to assist Indigenous entrepreneurs through business financing and advisory services. And we also do regional economic development that will help the First Nations in Northeast Ontario.
How many people have you invested in over the years, ballpark, would you say?
Well, probably we've invested in about 3,200 business projects, and we're starting to reach the 90 million mark in investments. With Wabatek, what we've done, though, some of those those businesses we've helped, like a couple of them, many times. So they're not all separate businesses. So it's been really nice to be there to help them start up, but also as they grow over the years. So we've done quite a few investments, and that are multiple investments in individual businesses. But we also help with business acquisitions and business expansions.
What's been the key to success that you found over the years? Do you find some special kinds of situations or people that are successful in the Indigenous community?
There was a lot of skepticism when Wabatek started up. I actually helped with the first business plan that we ever did and feasibility study, and I went around and interviewed other organizations, and I also interviewed some of the few businesses that existed at the time. But going around I think our people held out a lot of hope that Wabatek could be something special. But when we started, there was that skepticism where people thought that there's no way that the idea of a lending institution for Indigenous businesses will work. And I always remember one organization. It wasn't an Indigenous organization who told me that explicitly, that Indigenous, the idea of lending to Indigenous people just won't work. And to be quite honest with you, that kind of gave me some fuel to prove them wrong. Anyone who said that something doesn't work, and I after meeting a lot of the businesses when we were doing that the feasibility study, I could see that there was genuine need, genuine interest in having something like this. And when somebody said that it wouldn't be possible, I thought to myself, well, I'll show you. And it's not only been myself, but all the people who started with Wabatek. We had a really strong vision as to how this could make a difference in our communities.
Going back to a specific example, you made an investment in the Manitoulin Hotel and Convention Center, and that there was real strategic reason for that, because you've been working hard to sort of grab back the oversight, the management, and the creation of wealth in tourism. Could you talk about that investment and why it was important?
Mm-hmm. I think that every investment that Wabatek makes, we've, like I mentioned, worked on over 3,000 investments, whether it's a $500 loan or a $500,000 loan. They've all been loans that I think make a critical difference in the area. There's not just one, but in Manitoulin Island is known for its tourism. That's probably one of the largest businesses that are business sectors in the region. And so we started out by helping develop a tourism strategy, and at the time, we developed that back in 1997. We didn't really like tourism. We felt it exploited our people. there were all these motor coach buses coming through our communities, and we didn't have any step-on guides at that time, but these coaches would come through and we had no idea what they're telling the visitors about us. We weren't able to tell our own story. So we felt like we were on the outside of the circle, not part of the circle. So we decided that, okay, well, let's look at tourism. And we took a trip around to all of our communities, and we said, let's look at our communities through the lens of a visitor. And when we did that, we saw the beauty. We live in one of the most beautiful areas in the whole world. And we decided that, well, let's look at this tourism and see how we can benefit and see how we can take control and tell our own story. So that's what we did. And so it's been kind of a strategic plan we developed with the communities to develop tourism product, right from canoe tours and people learning how to bake bannock, and right up to building the Manitoulin Hotel and Conference Center. We've invested in eco lodges in the communities as well, and all of these are investments that Wabautek helped with. We helped with a new, we're known in this area for the beautiful porcupine quill baskets. And so we helped one business to expand and develop a museum for porcupine quill baskets. So this is an area that we thought, let's get involved and let's take over our story and tell our story right from our perspective. And I can tell you that people from around the world love it. They love coming here. They love to learn about the Indigenous culture here. They love to experience it by baking bannock, by sleeping in a teepee, by looking at the modern conveniences that we offer through modern accommodation. But going out on the water or walking a hiking trail with an Indigenous guide, it really makes a difference for visitors.
So do you view the investment that you do as activism in the community?
Should I use the word activism?
That's up to you.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that's a word that you associate with that.
You know, the work that we do might be a bit of, I think based on an attitude that, yeah, we can do this too. So it might be activism in one way, because our people are doing things that people thought wasn't possible before. We have Wabautek itself is proving that investing in Indigenous people and lending has been an important part of building and rebuilding our economies. And I think that the fact that Wabautek has a better loan repayment rate than most like institutions in Canada, and that we have a 94% loan repayment rate, and we have a better success rate of our businesses staying in business beyond 3 years. I think that that's activism. I think that when we're when we build franchise type businesses on reserve that were never there before, that's activism. I think when our people are stepping up and not being shy to give back to the community, to our hockey teams, to any fundraising we do for Indigenous youth in school, that it's our businesses now stepping up. I think that's activism. I think that when we're becoming leaders in different sectors, and I really do believe that's activism. You know, we're not only doing this in the field of tourism, but also in aquaculture. We have, as Indigenous people, developed our own aquaculture laws. And, it's we're the ones doing the monitoring and giving out licenses to our own people. This wasn't done before, like in the formal paper license way, but now we do that. We have our own laws for that. So that's activism. Our people are also working now, and we've developed a mining strategy, and our people are setting up entities that'll have our voice heard in resource development. And I think it's an important voice to be heard in resource development, to make sure that that development takes place in a sustainable way, and that our people are building capacity to better understand the industry, so that we can make sure that when there's resource development, that we're taking care of the water, that we're taking care of the animal life, that there's a way to do that. I strongly believe that you can do resource development in a balanced way. We all know that mineral development's important for the technology, the cars we drive, the cell phones that we use. We know that mineral development's important, but we also strongly believe it can be done in a sustainable way. So having our voice heard, I think that's activism.
Great. So how does it feel for you to be able to see the work that you do at Wabatech, like the investments that you make, and then be able to actually go to those businesses and meet those people and see how they're doing? I'm curious how that makes you feel.
I have probably one of the most rewarding jobs in the world, I think, because I get to work with a lot of people who started out being shy about sharing what their dream is. They were shy about saying that they wanted to open their own auto mechanic shop, or their own, tour guiding business, or their own retail shop. And in mainstream areas, not just in First Nation communities now, our Indigenous businesses are flourishing both on and off reserve. And so when I get to see them, I can tell you, when I say I have the best job in the world, I'm a huggy kind of person, and I can go to these businesses and I get a big hug. And that's kind of funny for a lender to be given a hug, because, you know, some people are afraid of their lenders, but for me, I have I have a comfort level talking with people and going in, and then I walk in and I get a hug. So I think that tells you that it's a really rewarding thing to invest in helping people achieve their dreams.
And do you think that kind of trust and relationship is unique to this community here? Is it sort of based on a sense of community that you can have that kind of relationship with those people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the fact that Wabatech's developed a pretty good name. It's not perfect. To be quite honest with you, we have an organization that started up, and we've never had any formal banking experience or anything like that. We're just trying to do the best that we can to help our communities grow economically, and to help our people achieve their business dreams. And when they achieve their dreams, their whole family grows up in an entrepreneurial kind of an atmosphere. So then we get a chance. Now we're dealing with third generation borrowers through Wabatech. So that's pretty rewarding. I can't say what it's like anywhere else, because I really don't know how other people work with their businesses or communities. I just know that we have a really strong sense of pride in what our businesses are accomplishing, because we know they have a lot more challenges to overcome to start a business, whether it's in a First Nation community or not, that they have a lot of challenges. And we try to make that business development a little bit easier for them, so that they have a place to call and get advice and get financial assistance. So we try to make that easier for them. Mm-hmm.
Don't have to answer this if I want to, but 40 years ago or more, when I was here running this newspaper in Manitoba. I did a story on racism where at Manitoba High School, it was called at the time,
Mm-hmm.
they were funneling Aboriginal kids away from universities and away from the colleges. And we did a story about that. And I was disheartened to see that there were some racial incidents recently at the high school. How do you see progress? You're right at the center of activity, of growing your community and helping it, and yet there's still residue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how you see progress over the last your
Mm-hmm.
working life. What are the positives? What are the negatives? What do we need to work harder on? How do you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes the way the climate is in the world today, sometimes it's very difficult for people to have empathy for groups that are struggling or that have had, there's wrong perceptions about different cultural groups and now around the world, and it's actually very scary to see that today. And I know that's a place where we came from before, and I thought that things were going in the right direction. And to be quite honest with you, I think there's a huge population that supports people working together. And I still strongly believe that there's still a positive. But today there's, maybe it's because of social media, you're learning more about, there's some real, true hatred in the world today, which is kind of sad. But I like to think that that's the minority, because you look at some mainstream media have had to cut off their commentary because of some of the awful things that are being said. But I also see another stream that's happening today of people who want to help with economic reconciliation. I really think that that's a beautiful effort, and that's where I want to concentrate, helping with economic reconciliation. That's where you can have, corporate Canada or major institutions or academic institutions or the health organizations become more involved in learning about the true Indigenous history of Canada, because that's been hidden for a long time. If people knew that history, they would understand the plight of Indigenous people in this country and the difficulties that have arisen because of how we were treated through colonization. And when you think of the residential school, and can you imagine whole communities with no children because the children are taken away, or the 60s scoop. I remember reading in the local papers about kids that were up for adoption, and it was almost like an ad, for these children to be adopted out of their Indigenous kids, adopted out of our area. We've gone through a lot. There's been even science experiments on our people, like without our consent. Our lands have been devastated without having our voices heard. I think that we're at a point where people understand, because of this history, that we need to have a voice. And our voice is becoming stronger. We have more educated people now. We have people who are good at making sure that our story is heard in our voice, and that we have some influence going forward. In Canada, Indigenous people have won the majority of court cases that have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada that are ruling in our favor in recognizing Indigenous rights. So I think that that's important. But, I think having people gain a better understanding, and that's our role as Indigenous people, to teach about our true history, to teach about the path that we can take for economic reconciliation. And when I say economic reconciliation, there's so many good ideas that people and organizations and companies have already to make a difference. I keep thinking of, I always give the examples of Reconciliation Australia, where companies there have built or developed reconciliation action plans that showcase steps that their companies or their hospitals or their universities want to take to walk this path of reconciliation. I can tell you that there's companies, when you walk into their doors, their front doors, they have a big sign that might say, welcome, you're on the traditional territories of these Indigenous people, and they might have welcome in the local Indigenous language as well, so that everything that they do are teaching about the Indigenous people. They are teaching their boards of directors about the history of the Indigenous people. They're teaching their frontline staff on how to, about the history, but also how to get to know people, how to get to know Indigenous people, how to spend time in the communities, because there's a big divide yet. Some people don't think that they can, they don't know who to talk to in an Indigenous community. So we have a role to educate on the best way to work together as well, and open the door to having better dialogue and communication, building that understanding for those who want to learn. And I think there's a lot of people out there who truly want to learn about our people and who truly want to walk that path of reconciliation with us.
Perhaps, I just had a question. Perhaps this is like a little bit off topic, but one thing that I'm noticing a lot lately is at big events, like I just had a graduation at my school of people doing land recognitions. So in Vermont, we have the Abenaki people, and I noticed the president of our college did a land recognition, but I was curious, it seems in a way that of doing just sort of lip service of saying something, but then actually not taking any steps to. So I was curious if you could speak to that at all. I'm just sort of curious.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you, in Canada, we're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls of action. And some people say, well, it's not going to be reconciliation until Canada recognizes our Indigenous people's rights to the land, and that our land claims are resolved, which is true. That's how true reconciliation will come about. But I also know that a hospital can't have anything to do with land claims. Maybe they can write a letter of support. I'm not sure, but if that's, but there's little that the average person can do about land claims, except voice maybe there's some support for Indigenous people. And so a lot of people think that acts of reconciliation that you see where people recognize that they're on the traditional territory of this First Nation are as trivial. But really, if it's not, well, it is trivial if that's the only thing they're going to do. If they haven't got a full reconciliation action plan, then it is trivial. If they don't have action where they're teaching and investing in training for their own staff and their leadership in companies, if they're not doing more than that, if they're not looking at a way to maybe procure business services from Indigenous businesses, or maybe hire young Indigenous people who are qualified, if they're not doing more than just recognizing the traditional territory, then it is trivial. I think there's a lot more that people can do, and I'm really happy to say that I've seen organizations and companies becoming more creative in how they can do more meaningful reconciliation.
last question. Do you think Northern Ontario, in terms of the questions that we speak of, the reconciliation, working together, trying to be creative about creating wealth for one another, do you think Northern Ontario is at a new level of maturity, notwithstanding some of these social media anger fests or whatever goes on? Or are we still struggling? How do you feel from your vantage point about how Northern Ontario has changed in the last 35, 40 years?
For Northern Ontario, in terms of reconciliation, I believe there's still a bit of a divide there. You know, you look at some of the situations, you know, I hate to point out, like, but yeah, I'm thinking of in Thunder Bay, for example, and the loss of the young people that are coming in from the far north to go to school there. It happens everywhere. I'm not just saying Thunder Bay, but we have young people from the isolated First Nations wanting to have a good future, wanting to get a better education, and then they come into some of the cities and they're not treated in the same way that you know, maybe other newcomers are treated. I really like in one of the universities, when they have people coming from other countries, they welcome them. They have a welcoming committee at the airport that and they give them hats and mitts and winter jackets, because they know, of course, our climate here is going to be cold. But when you're coming from another country, it's kind of a nice welcome to get those kinds of things. And when you have youth from the far north coming in and they don't have a welcoming committee there for them, you know, that shows a bit of a disconnect yet. There's you know, that's the reality, where our you know, there's been efforts to train police forces to have a better understanding, and I'm glad that some recommendations have come out recently about the need for training police forces. And today's the day that the Commission on the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women have their official report comes out today, and they have over 200 recommendations. So that shows that there's still a lot of work to be done. I think people are becoming more aware of a lot of these issues and the divide that does exist. It's been ignored and not spoken about for many years. But now, when you look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the report coming out today on missing and murdered Indigenous women, with lots of recommendations in those reports, it shows that there's still a lot of work to be done. I think it's important for everybody to read some of those reports and take a piece of it and say, well, I'm going to try to help in this way. If everybody took a piece of it, I'm talking about all of us, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, took a piece of those recommendations and said, you know what, I think I'm going to help follow this recommendation and make something happen that's good. I really do think that we can make some progress. There's always been an undertone of that disconnect, and now it's being brought to the forefront, and sometimes when people hear the truth, it hurts, and that's what it's all about, is telling the truth. We need to start there, and then when there's recommendations made, we need to grab hold of those and take them on as our own if we really want to make a difference.
Can I just get you to say your name again, just to make sure that I have it?
My name is Dawn Madahbee Leach, and I'm the General Manager of the Wabatek Business Development Corporation. Really? We went more than business.
Well, it is more than business.
Yeah, it is more than business, really. Activism.
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hard work.
Miigwech. I don't. I hope I. I hope I sounded a bit hopeful though. Just saying, but that's I know the reality needs to be talked about. But mm-hmm.
Well, you know, it is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's, you know.
Oh, maybe I could say one other thing. That can I
Yeah.
add something more? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that makes my heart happy, though, is that I see a lot of hope. I see my daughter's generation, where she has friends who are Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and it's so good to see that I don't see any of that divide or any problems with them working together. They're my daughter's good friends. I know they love to come with us to powwows, and they've always been hungry to learn more. And I think there's hope for the future generations in working together. And I think it's really great that we're all learning about the truth now, so that I really truly believe it's the younger people who are going to lead the way to change. And the younger people will have a more open mind about this, and I think that's going to bode well for the future. My daughter's best friend is Alicia McCutcheon, and they grew up together and went to ballet and figure skating, and they're still good friends. And I saw Alicia at the powwow this weekend, and AOK, and she's traveled with Crystal and I to powwows before, and so it's when you meet Alicia, you'll meet her at the expositor, and she's a really good friend of my daughter's. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.